If you're watching this right now, you're about to discover something that will fundamentally change how you interact with reality itself. The key to this transformation lies not in action, effort, or force, but in a precise mechanism that lies at the very foundation of your existence: observation. In fact, there is a specific way of observing reality that causes the quantum field to reorganize, restructure, and literally rewrite your life circumstances. At first glance, this might sound strange, perhaps even abstract. However, once you begin to understand the mechanisms behind it, you'll realize that this isn't about positive thinking or visualization techniques. It's not even about feeling better or making more conscious decisions. This is about quantum mechanics, operating at the level of consciousness itself. When you observe the world in the right way, you are not simply perceiving a pre-existing reality. Instead, you are actively creating reality through the observation itself. To grasp this concept, we need to first look at one of the most famous experiments in the history of science, the double-slit experiment. This experiment proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that observation affects the observed. In a traditional experiment, when particles, like electrons, are shot through a barrier with two slits, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern on the other side. This pattern is indicative of the particles having passed through both slits simultaneously, existing in multiple states at once. However, when an observer is introduced when the experiment is measured, the particles suddenly behave as though they've passed through only one slit, collapsing into a particle-like state. This phenomenon, known as wave function collapse, demonstrates that particles behave as waves when unobserved, but they collapse into specific particles when observed. But here's where most people misunderstand this principle. It's not just about whether you observe that matters. How you observe determines what reality collapses into. If you observe with a certain expectation or belief, you collapse the wave into a particular reality. If you observe without any expectation, you allow the field to remain in its pure potential, choosing a reality that might otherwise not have been possible. This is where the power of observation lies. When you understand this principle and apply it consciously, you can begin to shape your reality in ways you've never imagined. The quantum field is not a fixed, predetermined reality. Rather, it contains infinite possibilities that exist simultaneously, all in a state of superposition. This means that, at any given moment, everything that could potentially happen exists as a probability, but none of these possibilities are more real than another. The act of observation is what collapses these possibilities into a singular reality that you experience. What does this mean for your life? It means that your current life circumstances are not fixed or unchangeable. They are simply the collapsed possibility that resulted from your current method of observation. The possibilities for what could happen in your life are limitless, but the one you experience depends entirely on how you observe it. Imagine you are looking at a problem in your life, perhaps an obstacle you've been struggling with for a long time. If you continue to observe that problem with the mindset that it is unsolvable, with the belief that it will never change, then the quantum field will reflect that observation. The reality you experience will reinforce your beliefs, keeping you locked in a cycle of limitation. On the other hand, if you shift your observation to one that is open, hopeful, and receptive to solutions, the quantum field will reorganize itself to match that new expectation. You are not a passive observer of life. You are an active creator of the life you experience, and it all begins with how you observe your world. But you might be wondering, why are you encountering this information at this exact moment? It's not just a random content recommendation or a mere coincidence. Consciousness has a remarkable ability to align with information that matches its frequency. You are here because your consciousness has reached a point where the understanding of right observation is possible. This isn't a coincidence. It's quantum resonance. You are ready to hear this because your consciousness has evolved to the point where you can now consciously apply the principles of quantum mechanics. This is no longer a process happening automatically in the background. It's now something you can bring into your awareness and apply intentionally. Have you ever noticed that when you observe your problems directly, they tend to intensify? When you focus on lack, more lack seems to appear. When you look for evidence of limitation, it is confirmed repeatedly. This is not just confirmation bias or selective attention. This is the quantum observation effect. When you observe a situation in a certain way, the field responds to your observation, reinforcing the reality you are observing. For instance, when you focus on the problems in your life, you magnify them. Your attention locks them into your experience. You are using the method of observation to confirm and reinforce the current state, rather than using observation to create a new state. This is a powerful realization. It means that the act of observation, how you look at your life, your circumstances, your relationships, is actively creating the reality you experience. Dr. Dean Radin's groundbreaking research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences provides measurable proof that consciousness affects quantum systems. Through thousands of experiments, Dr. Radin has demonstrated that the intention behind an observer's gaze, the expectations they hold, and the consciousness state of the observer can directly influence quantum outcomes. This goes beyond mere psychology or positive thinking. It's not about hoping or wishing for things to get better. This is about using intention and observation to influence the fabric of reality. The mind, the emotions, and the consciousness state all play a direct role in how reality collapses. For example, when you observe a situation with the expectation that it will improve, the quantum field responds by reorganizing itself to align with that observation. The same situation, seen through the lens of lack or difficulty, will collapse into a reality that matches those expectations. This is how powerful observation is. So, how do you observe your life circumstances? Do you observe to confirm what's already true? Do you gather evidence of your current reality, seeing things exactly as they are? If so, you've been using observation to lock in your current reality, reinforcing what already exists. But this is not how you create new possibilities. When you observe life through the lens of lack, you collapse the field into a reality of lack. When you observe life as already improving, you collapse the field into a reality of improvement. Observation is not a passive process, it's an active creation. Your life circumstances, as they are now, are not a result of fate or some cosmic force acting upon you. They are simply the result of how you've been observing them. The moment you change the way you observe, the moment you change your method of observation, the quantum field responds, and your reality reorganizes to match that new observation. One of the most fascinating phenomena of quantum observation is when reality seems to shift when you stop looking directly at it. This often happens when a problem feels unsolvable, but when you shift your attention away from it, the solution suddenly appears. This phenomenon isn't about the problem solving itself while you're not looking. Rather, it's about how your observation method, while focused on the problem, was preventing the solution from appearing. When you stop fixating on the issue and shift your observation to a different perspective, the quantum field reorganizes itself to allow the solution to collapse into your experience. In other words, it's not that the solution was there all along and you just missed it. It's that by changing the way you observe the problem, you allow a new reality to collapse, one where the solution is visible and accessible. Another fascinating aspect of observation is how circumstances change when you observe them as already improved, rather than as something that needs improvement. When you look at a challenging situation and think, "This needs to change," you reinforce the idea that change is necessary, and the problem persists or worsens. But when you look at the same situation and observe it as already shifting toward resolution, the situation starts to transform. This is the quantum field at work. Observation doesn't just passively perceive reality, it actively creates it. By observing the same situation with a different expectation, you collapse a different version of reality into experience. This process happens not only on the mental or emotional level, but at the quantum level, where the very fabric of reality rearranges itself to match your expectations. Your observation doesn't just affect your own reality, it also affects others. This is particularly evident when you observe others in a certain way and they respond according to how you perceive them. If you observe someone as difficult or threatening, they will behave in a way that confirms that perception. But if you observe the same person as cooperative or supportive, they will behave differently. This is not because you've changed your behavior toward them, but because your observation method has influenced the quantum field, reorganizing the interaction to match your expectations. Dr. Robert Rosenthal's research on expectancy effects proves this scientifically. His experiments demonstrated that when teachers observed students as high potential, students performed dramatically better than when they were observed as low potential, even when they were randomly assigned to these categories. This is not just a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's a measurable quantum effect where observation affects the outcome. As you refine your observation method, you'll begin to notice that manifestation speeds up. Early in your conscious manifestation practice, outcomes may take weeks or months to appear. But as you get better at observing with clarity and intention, those same outcomes begin to manifest in days or even hours. This is because you are using observation not as a passive perception, but as an active tool to affect the quantum field. When manifestation doesn't happen, it's not because it's impossible. It's because your observation method was reinforcing the existing reality rather than creating a new one. When you first encountered the idea of manifestation, the promises were simple and captivating. Visualize your dreams, speak positive affirmations, and think with optimism, and your reality would change. You began practicing these techniques, fully invested in the process, only to experience frustration when things didn't unfold the way you expected. Visualization didn't work as promised, affirmations didn't create change, and positive thinking didn't seem to manifest the results you were hoping for. The frustration was real, and it may have left you feeling disillusioned or even questioning your ability to manifest anything at all. However, the issue you encountered wasn't a failure of the manifestation principles themselves. Instead, it stemmed from a misunderstanding of how quantum observation mechanics work. The techniques you were using were often applying the concept of observation in ways that were counterproductive to the desired outcomes. In the quantum realm, observation doesn't simply mean looking at something. It's far more nuanced, and this subtle misunderstanding could explain why things didn't work out the way you envisioned. The key to understanding the failure in manifestation lies in the way you were observing your desired outcome. Often, you might have approached manifestation techniques by observing your desired outcome as something separate from your current reality, something that exists in the future, a goal to strive for, but not something available in the present. This form of observation, which treats your desired outcome as a future possibility rather than a present reality, can reinforce the illusion of separation between where you are now and where you want to be. It inadvertently locks your field of energy into its current configuration, making it harder for your desired outcome to materialize. Every time you checked to see if your manifestation was working, or when you actively searched for signs of progress, you were applying the wrong kind of observation. You may have thought you were doing everything right, affirming, visualizing, and holding a positive mindset. But in reality, when you checked, you were unintentionally expecting to find absence instead of presence. The simple act of checking, looking for evidence of change, or seeking confirmation of your manifestation was in itself an observation that reinforced the current state of reality. When you checked to see if your manifestation had occurred, you were expecting to find that it wasn't there yet. "Let me see if it's here now," was a common thought that likely passed through your mind. This type of observation focuses on the idea of lack. What you desire is still absent, and you're merely waiting for it to arrive. However, this observation method doesn't shift the field. Instead, it collapses it into the same absence that you're observing. It affirms that what you desire is still not present, locking you further into your current reality. Similarly, when you observed your circumstances, you may have been looking for evidence of change, assuming that something would have shifted in your life by now. That observation method reinforces your current reality. When you observe your present state and expect to see the same things, you reinforce the unchanged nature of things, preventing any real transformation. The problem with these observation methods lies in the expectations they create. The act of observing without the awareness of how it truly works can unintentionally lock you into a reality where change is delayed or denied. These observation methods limit your ability to collapse the quantum field into your desired reality. Take a moment to think about a specific manifestation attempt that you put a lot of effort into but which failed despite your dedication. Can you now recognize that while you were visualizing the desired outcome, you were also continuously observing your current reality to check on your progress? You may have thought that by observing the present state you were somehow bringing your desires closer. However, in reality, you were simply reinforcing the present state rather than shifting it. Can you see how your tendency to check often and with emotional intensity might have been much stronger than your visualization practices? This pattern of checking observation was more frequent and emotionally charged than your visualization practice, which was intended to create change. Every time you focused on your current reality, you were reinforcing the idea that the desired reality had not yet appeared. Essentially, you were using observation to confirm lack, rather than to create the presence of your desired outcome. The results were predictable. The field responded to the dominant observation method, confirming lack, because that's exactly what you expected to find. In moments where manifestation worked smoothly and easily, it was because you had unknowingly used the correct observation technique. You were observing your desires as already present and available, rather than as something you were hoping to receive in the future. You were looking for evidence of presence rather than absence. This observation method creates the conditions for manifestation to unfold naturally, without force or contradiction. When manifestation failed despite your sustained effort, the issue wasn't with your techniques or your intentions, it was the observation method. You were still observing your desires as though they were separate from the present reality, looking for signs of change rather than assuming that change had already occurred. The manifestation didn't fail because the principles didn't work. It failed because the observation method wasn't in alignment with the mechanics of quantum reality. In this way, your entire journey through manifestation has been a process of unconscious experimentation with observation methods. You've been learning through trial and error which observation methods lead to success and which prevent manifestation. Each success provided valuable insight into the correct observation method, even if you didn't fully understand why things worked the way they did. Similarly, every failure showed you where your observation method was blocking the desired outcome. The key was recognizing that understanding quantum observation mechanics could turn the random successes into consistent, reliable skills. The frustrations and sufferings you encountered when reality seemed unchangeable despite your desires were not evidence of your powerlessness. Rather, they were proof that you were observing powerfully, but in the wrong way. You had been using observation to reinforce a reality that mirrored lack and limitation, instead of using it to create a reality in alignment with your desires and possibilities. Your observation was working, just not in the way you intended. You were unconsciously using your expertise in observation to create a reality that confirmed your worst fears and doubts. Every time your fears manifested in reality, every time your worst expectations came true, it was because your observation method was effectively collapsing the quantum field into that reality. You weren't unlucky. You were a highly skilled quantum observer, but you were applying that skill in ways that reinforced your fears instead of your desires. The breakthrough came when you realized that you have always been a powerful quantum observer. You've been collapsing the field into a reality, matching your observation method your entire life. What needs to change isn't learning to affect reality, because you've been doing that all along. What needs to change is the method of observation. Shifting from unconscious observation that confirms your current reality to conscious observation that creates your desired reality is the key. With this shift, manifestation doesn't become a mystical, elusive process. It becomes a predictable and reliable skill, rooted in the precise mechanics of quantum observation. Around 10 years ago, I found myself deeply obsessed with figuring out why manifestation techniques seem to work sometimes and fail at other times. There were moments when my intentions manifested perfectly with minimal effort, and other times when I could put months of dedicated practice into my desires and see nothing happen. There were even occasions when the exact opposite of what I intended would manifest. I tried every manifestation system, followed every technique, and practiced with religious discipline, but consistency remained elusive. That's when I came across research in quantum mechanics, particularly the concept of observation affecting the observed reality. Everything clicked into place. I realized that all manifestation techniques rely on observation in one form or another. Visualizing your desired outcome is, in essence, observing it mentally. Affirming your intention is observing it verbally. Focusing on your goal is a form of attention-based observation. What was fascinating, however, was that different techniques employed different methods of observation. And, without conscious awareness, many people unknowingly mixed multiple methods, which created contradictory observations that either cancelled each other out or reinforced an undesired reality. This phenomenon created the inconsistency that many people experience with manifestation. To truly master the art of manifestation, I realized, you have to understand and apply the right observation methods. To explore this insight further, I decided to systematically test various observation methods. I chose small, manageable intentions that would be easy to track, yet meaningful enough to provide clear evidence of success or failure. For example, I would intend to find a parking spot in a crowded area, receive a specific amount of money, meet a particular person, or discover a piece of specific information. These were intentions where the result would be obvious if the observation method worked correctly, and if they didn't manifest, the consequences wouldn't be significant. For each intention, I applied pure observation methods without introducing any other manifestation techniques such as action, force, or typical manifestation practices. My goal was to see what could happen if I relied solely on observation and the expectation that the field would shift in response to my observation. The first method I tested was what I call confirmation observation. This involved observing my desired outcome as though it already existed in the present moment. For example, when I intended to find a parking spot, I would focus on the parking area, expecting to find an available spot. Rather than visualizing the spot appearing or affirming that it existed, I simply observed with the expectation that the spot was available right now, just waiting to be discovered. The results were immediate and undeniable. When using confirmation observation, I consistently found parking spots in crowded areas where I had previously spent 20 minutes circling without success. With confirmation observation, I was able to find spots in these crowded lots over 90% of the time. This wasn't a fluke or a coincidence. The method worked reliably and consistently. It wasn't about visualizing a spot appearing or affirming that one existed. It was about observing with the firm expectation that a spot was already available, and then waiting for the field to reveal that availability. I expanded this method to more significant intentions, such as manifesting money. I needed $2,847 for an unexpected expense. Instead of stressing over how to get the money or worrying about not having it, I used confirmation observation. I focused on my financial reality, expecting to discover exactly the amount I needed through some unexpected channel. Within 3 days, I received a freelance project offer paying exactly $2,850, just $3 more than I had observed. The client reached out to me out of nowhere, mentioning that they had been given my name by someone I worked with 2 years earlier. The synchronicity of the timing, the exact amount, and the unexpected channel of communication were all evidence of the power of confirmation observation. Over the following year, I tested confirmation observation with numerous other specific intentions. I used it to find specific information, meet specific people, and manifest opportunities. In each case, the manifestation appeared with surprising synchronicity and accuracy. The success rate was over 80% when I relied purely on confirmation observation without mixing in contradictory observation methods. However, I also found that using the wrong observation method led to the opposite results with equal reliability. When I used checking observation, observing reality to see if the desired outcome had appeared yet things didn't manifest, or if they did, they appeared distorted or delayed. Checking observation operates under the assumption that something is missing or absent until change occurs, which collapses the field into continued absence. This became especially clear when I combined confirmation observation with checking observation. The two methods contradicted each other. It was like pressing the accelerator and brake at the same time. Movement couldn't occur efficiently. Checking observation constantly reinforced the idea of absence, undermining the confirmation that the desired outcome was already present. I learned that observation method isn't just a supplementary technique to use alongside other manifestation practices. Observation is the mechanism through which consciousness interacts with the quantum field. Every other manifestation technique, visualization, affirmation, action, either supports or contradicts the effectiveness of observation. When observation is correct, minimal effort is needed for manifestation to occur. When observation is wrong, no amount of technique can overcome the resistance created by the observation method. 3 years into working exclusively with observation techniques, I faced my ultimate test. My father needed a medical procedure that cost $40,000, an amount not covered by insurance. As time passed, I realized that raising money through traditional channels was completely impossible given the timeline I had to work with. The usual avenues for securing such an amount of money simply weren't going to work in time. But by this point, I had come to understand the true mechanics of observation in quantum physics. I no longer needed to figure out how the money would appear or where it would come from. I didn't need to control the details or manipulate the process. What I needed to do was simply observe correctly and allow the quantum field to organize the outcome through whatever channel it deemed most appropriate. I had learned that, if I observed properly, the field would respond in its own way to manifest the desired outcome. For the next 10 days, I committed myself to using pure confirmation observation. I observed my financial reality, expecting to find $40,000 already available, awaiting discovery through a channel that would be revealed to me through continued observation. There was no need for me to visualize the money appearing or repeat affirmations. I didn't need to take desperate action or scramble for solutions. I simply maintained the observation, expecting to discover availability at any moment. I was no longer trying to force anything to happen. I was allowing it to unfold naturally, trusting that it already existed in the quantum field as a possibility, waiting for me to recognize it. On the 11th day, something extraordinary happened. Out of nowhere, my attorney contacted me. He told me that a settlement from a legal matter I had long forgotten about had been unexpectedly resolved, and that I was receiving exactly $43,000 more than enough to cover the medical expenses. The timing of this outcome was impossible through normal causation. The case had been dormant, and there was no expectation of a settlement, let alone knowing the exact amount. The result couldn't have been predicted, nor could it have been accessed through any effort or action on my part. The quantum field had organized this outcome in response to my observation, using a channel I had no knowledge of and could not have consciously planned for. This experience was a turning point for me, as it definitively proved that the right observation method doesn't just improve the chances of manifestation, it allows the field to rewrite reality entirely. By observing correctly, I was able to trigger synchronicities that bypassed normal causation and logic. I was no longer confined to manipulating circumstances through direct effort. I was working with the quantum field's incredible capacity for reorganization, which can create outcomes through channels that are beyond what logical planning and typical effort could ever access. The realization that I didn't need to know how the money would manifest, only that I needed to observe correctly, changed everything. It wasn't about understanding the mechanism or figuring out how things would fall into place. It was about being present in the observation process and letting the quantum field determine the best pathway. I just needed to maintain the right observation, and the field would take care of the rest. The role of observation became clear to me as the mechanism through which reality was shaped, with the field reorganizing itself according to the expectations I had set through my observations. This concept is grounded in the principles of quantum mechanics, which describe how the observer can influence the observed reality. The traditional view of manifestation was, at its core, flawed. It involved expecting a desired outcome to appear without fully understanding the quantum process at work. It's not just about visualizing or affirming your desires. It's about the way you observe reality, how you expect to perceive it, and how that expectation influences the quantum field. The mechanics of quantum observation are subtle, but once understood, they unlock the ability to consciously shape one's experience of reality. So what is the right observation method? How does it differ from the wrong way most people observe reality, often unconsciously? And why does this distinction have the power to transform someone from a passive observer of reality into an active creator of it? The shocking revelation is that the right observation is observing reality as if the desired outcome already exists, and you're simply discovering evidence of its existence. This is in stark contrast to the wrong observation method, where the observer assumes that the desired outcome doesn't yet exist, and spends time checking to see if it has appeared. Both methods involve the act of observation, but they have entirely different consequences on the quantum field because the field collapses in response to the observer's expectation. The most common mistake that people make is that they unconsciously observe reality in a way that reinforces what they don't want. For instance, they might look at their bank account expecting to find a lack of money. This is an example of checking observation. The observation is made with the expectation of absence. Similarly, they might monitor their current circumstances, expecting to see problems or issues. Again, this is checking observation, confirming the presence of limitation. If someone observes their body with the expectation of finding symptoms of illness, they are once again observing from a place of expectation for absence, reinforcing the idea of the body being sick or unwell. Every time we engage in checking observation, we are collapsing the field into a reality that matches the expectation of absence. This doesn't just reinforce the existing situation, it actually creates more of it, ensuring that the desired outcome remains absent. In contrast, right observation completely inverts this method. With right observation, you observe your desired outcome expecting to find it already present, already available, and already existing. It's not about pretending that the desired outcome exists if it doesn't. It's about recognizing that the desired outcome already exists in the quantum field as a possibility, and your role is to observe it in a way that collapses it into your experience. This method doesn't involve denying current reality, nor does it require pretending that everything is perfect when it's not. It's about acknowledging the quantum truth that your desired outcome already exists as a possibility, just waiting for you to recognize it. The act of observation, when done correctly, collapses this possibility into the present moment, transforming it from potential to experienced reality. Dr. Yakira Haronov's research on quantum weak measurements helps to illuminate this idea. His work suggests that quantum systems can be affected not only by past measurements but also by future ones. This means that the quantum field responds not only to observations of the current state of affairs, but also to expectations about the future state. This is a game changer, as it suggests that how an observer expects the future to unfold plays a critical role in determining how the quantum field organizes itself. What most people fail to recognize is that right observation isn't just about visualizing the desired outcome or affirming it. These are mental practices, and they can still be done incorrectly if the underlying observation method is flawed. For instance, you can visualize your desired outcome perfectly but still be engaging in wrong observation if you constantly check your current reality and expect to find that your desire hasn't manifested yet. Checking observation overrides the visualization because direct observation of physical reality has a stronger impact on the quantum field than imagined observation. This is why so many manifestation techniques fail, even when the visualization is done perfectly. People might visualize their desired outcome for 10 minutes, affirm their intentions, and feel good about it. But then, for the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes of the day, they check their current reality, expecting to find that their desire hasn't appeared yet. This constant checking reinforces the absence of the desired outcome, which collapses the quantum field into a reality that confirms their doubts and fears. The right observation method, however, has three essential components that must align simultaneously for it to work effectively. The first component is observation expectation. When you observe reality, you must expect to find evidence of the desired outcome already present. This isn't about hoping for it or wishing for it to be there, it's about fully expecting it to be present, because at the quantum level, it already exists as a potential, just waiting to be collapsed into experience. Your expectation directly influences which possibility in the quantum field will collapse. If you expect absence, you'll find absence. If you expect presence, you'll find presence. The second component is observation focus. Where you direct your observation matters. Attention is a powerful force in quantum mechanics, and it determines what the field organizes around. If you observe lack, the field will organize around that lack and reinforce it. If you observe possibility, the field will organize to show you more possibility. The key is to focus your observation on the solutions and the possibilities, rather than the problems. Most people focus intensely on their problems and only casually consider the solutions. This creates a mismatch between their desires and their experiences, as the field will always organize itself around the strongest focus. The third component is observation frequency. How often you observe correctly versus incorrectly determines how clearly the quantum field receives its instructions. One moment of correct observation followed by hours of incorrect observation won't produce strong results. The key is consistency. When you consistently observe with the right method throughout the day, with minimal periods of wrong observation, the cumulative effect becomes powerful. The field responds to the dominant observation pattern. If you spend most of your time observing with the expectation that your desired outcome is already present, the field will reorganize itself to make that reality your experience. When all three components align, expecting to find the desired outcome already present, focusing observation on evidence of the desired state, and maintaining that observation consistently, the field receives clear instructions and reorganizes accordingly. Your reality will literally rewrite itself to match the observation method, because observation is the mechanism through which consciousness collapses a specific reality from the quantum field of infinite possibilities. Here's the ultimate recognition that changes everything. You don't need to know how your desired outcome will manifest. You don't need to see the pathway from your current situation to your desired reality. You don't need to understand how everything will unfold. The only thing you need to do is observe correctly, expecting to find the desired state already present. The field will organize the outcome through whatever pathway it deems optimal, bypassing the need for you to plan every detail. Trying to figure out how manifestation will occur is often a form of wrong observation because it is rooted in checking observation. The act of trying to figure out the how is essentially an expectation of absence, of not knowing how things will come together. When you let go of the need to know the how and instead expect to discover evidence that the outcome is already organizing, you allow the field to work on your behalf. The field's intelligence is vastly greater than any human conscious planning, and it will guide the manifestation process in ways that you couldn't predict or plan for. The implications of this are profound. Observation isn't passive. It's an active form of creation. By observing in the right way, you're selecting which reality collapses from the infinite possibilities available in the quantum field. You're not merely observing what already exists. You're observing what becomes real through your active observation. Right observation method is the mechanism through which you create your reality right now. In this very moment, reality is confirming that you understand how right observation works. The signals are immediate, clear, and undeniable, so long as you are paying attention. These are not delayed confirmations requiring faith or blind hope. They are real-time demonstrations of how observation creates reality when applied correctly. The first signal is a shift in how circumstances feel when you change your observation method. When you observe your current challenges with checking observation, expecting to find problems, the circumstances feel heavy, stuck, and overwhelming. But when you shift to confirmation observation, expecting to find evidence that things are already shifting, your experience of the same circumstances feels lighter, more fluid, and more workable. Nothing external has changed. Only your observation method has shifted, and the field responds by reorganizing in response to the new instructions. The second signal is the appearance of synchronicities that match your expectations. When you observe your financial reality, for example, expecting to find an unexpected source of income, you may find that, within days, someone contacts you with an opportunity or money shows up through a forgotten channel. The synchronicities align with your expectation in a way that cannot be attributed to coincidence, confirming that the field is responding to your observation method. The third signal is the resolution of problems when you stop observing them as problems. Instead of seeing them as unsolvable issues, you begin observing them as situations that are already shifting toward resolution. Problems that once seemed insurmountable start to show their solutions because you've shifted your observation to focus on potential resolutions rather than the problems themselves. These signals are all clear indications that your observation method is working, confirming that you are actively creating reality through the way you observe it. When you shift your observation method to align with what you desire, you will begin to see the field reorganize itself accordingly. The fourth signal is social. People begin responding to you differently when you hold and sustain a different expectation while you observe them. A person who previously felt combative or difficult when you watch for tension will often present as cooperative once you begin watching for collaboration. The same individual, the same room, the same topic, yet the interaction moves on a different track because your observing stance has shifted. A relationship that felt distant when you looked for signs of withdrawal tends to feel warmer and more open when you look for indications of connection. The mechanism is partly behavioral. Your micro-expressions, tone, pacing, and word choice align with the expectation you carry, and those cues shape the other person's responses. It is also attentional. Your mind privileges data that matches your expectation, which then changes how you respond in real time. Taken together, the field of interaction organizes around your observation method, not merely around personalities or the history between people. In practice, this looks like meetings that used to derail now finding common ground, family conversations that were brittle becoming surprisingly tender, and negotiations that felt zero-sum, revealing win-win elements you literally could not perceive before you shifted how you were looking. The fifth signal is environmental. Details in reality seem to confirm your observation expectation in ways that feel impossible from a purely linear, predictive standpoint. You set an expectation to notice a particular sign, a number sequence, a motif, a phrase, and then that exact element appears repeatedly, often through channels you did not control or anticipate. An uncommon symbol shows up in 3 unrelated places in one afternoon. A sentence that was just in your mind is spoken aloud by a stranger in line. A person emails you with the very wording you scripted the night before. Skepticism is healthy here. We should distinguish confirmation bias from genuine pattern coupling. Yet when specificity is high, channels are independent, and timing is tight, the probability of random overlap narrows. The useful model is your observation method is not only filtering your perception, it is participating in how situational details arrange themselves. The field organizes around the instruction embedded in your expectation, providing confirmations that are not merely comforting but operational, pointing you to actions, connections, and sequences that carry your intention forward. The sixth signal is temporal. The speed of manifestation increases as you maintain the right observation consistently. Early on, your first deliberate attempts at confirmation-based observation may take days or weeks to produce recognizable outcomes because your signal is mixed. You set a clear expectation in the morning and then spend the afternoon covertly checking whether it worked, reverting to an absence-focused stance that instructs the field to stabilize the very lack you are anxious about. With practice, as you hold the confirmation frame without frequent relapse into checking, the lag shortens. Results begin showing up in hours instead of days, minutes instead of hours. The underlying rule is simple. Clear, continuous instruction is easier for any system to follow than contradictory, intermittent instruction. Consistency reduces ambiguity, and the response becomes more rapid and reliable. The seventh signal is structural. Pathways open that you could not have planned or forced into existence by effort alone. A solution arrives through a channel you did not know existed. An introduction forms with a person outside your social graph. An opportunity materializes from a source you would never have listed in any strategy document. These events feel like serendipity, but they are not merely happy accidents. They are the field reorganizing around your observation instruction, leveraging intelligence beyond your conscious planning to assemble outcomes that match your expectation. Critically, these pathways often carry less friction than the routes you were trying to push through. They are not only unexpected, they are efficient. Applying the right observation method is an operational skill, not a vague mindset. The following procedure generalizes to any domain: work, finances, health, relationships, creative practice, because it addresses the structure of observation itself. Step 1 is intention for observation. Before you look at a situation, specify what your observation expects to find. This is not about what you hope for or what you wish might happen someday. It is an assertion about what your observation will discover as already present or already in process. For a financial scenario, you might set, I observe expecting to find evidence that money is already flowing toward me through channels now becoming visible. For health, I observe expecting to find evidence that my body is already healing and vitality is already increasing. For relationships, I observe expecting to find evidence that connection is already deepening and harmony is already present. The wording matters less than the stance. Expectation of presence rather than search for absence. In the absence of a deliberate intention, observation defaults to old patterns, which often means scanning for what is missing or what could go wrong. Conscious intention overrides that default and instructs the field to collapse around the desired state, not around the lack of it. To sharpen this step, define criteria you would accept as evidence in advance. What will you count as proof that flow is present, healing is underway, or connection is deepening? Pre-committing to criteria reduces the temptation to move the goalposts or to interpret everything pessimistically out of habit. Step 2 is evidence-gathering observation. Throughout the day, look as a skilled detective would, searching for signs that the desired state is already organizing. You're not waiting for a dramatic before and after moment, you're assembling a chain of small indicators. A minor payment you were not expecting arrives. You notice 1 hour with less pain and better mobility than last week. A person replies faster and with more warmth than usual. A project bottleneck loosens. A repeated symbol appears at the right time to highlight an option you had overlooked. Each item is not the outcome in full, but each is a tile in the mosaic. The critical distinction here is between checking and confirming. Checking asks, "Is it here yet?" That question presupposes absence and instructs the field to keep absence dominant. Confirmation asks, "Where do I see evidence of its presence?" That question presupposes presence and instructs the field to organize more of it. Keep a real-time log. Write down even small pieces of evidence. The act of recording stabilizes the confirmation stance and trains attention to see the subtle beginnings of change that checking mode would miss. Step 3 is interruption of checking. The moment you catch yourself scanning to see whether the desired outcome has arrived, stop. Checking seems harmless, but structurally it carries the expectation of absence. Treat it as an error state in your operating system. Interrupt it with a scripted pivot. I'm not checking if it is here. I'm discovering where its presence is already showing. Then look for one sign, any sign that fits the presence frame. Use simple somatic anchors to support the pivot. Relax your jaw and shoulders, slow your breathing, soften your gaze. These cues signal to your nervous system that you are not in threat mode. Install external prompts if necessary. A small note on your workspace, a phone reminder that says confirmation, a silent vibration that interrupts rumination. Most people check dozens of times a day without realizing that each microcheck reinforces absence. Your task is not to never slip, it is to notice faster and reverse the stance more skillfully each time. Over days, the number of checking episodes falls, their duration shortens, and their intensity drops. Step 4 is reframing contrary evidence. You will encounter facts that appear to contradict your desired state. A bill arrives, symptoms flare, a conversation goes sideways. If you treat these as proof that your observation is not working, you instruct the field to stabilize failure. Instead, place contrary evidence inside a 2-timeline model. There is the current snapshot, what is manifest right now, and there is the trajectory, what the field is reorganizing toward under your instruction. Lag is real. Systems need time to reconfigure. You can acknowledge current constraints without endorsing them as final. Translate your narration in real time. This is the current layer while the deeper layer is reordering. I will keep looking for signs that the deeper layer is surfacing. Practically, this means you still act responsibly, pay the bill, rest the body. Apologize if needed while you sustain confirmation observation. You refuse to let a local data point define the global trend. Step 5 is appreciation-based observation. Appreciation is not a platitude, it is a force multiplier. Observation always affects the field. Observation charged with stable, positive emotion tends to have a larger effect. Cultivate the ability to notice and value what is workable, supportive, or already improving. Appreciate that you are conscious enough to run this method. Appreciate the resilience of your body and the intelligence in the field that arranges novel solutions. Appreciate small improvements and early coincidences rather than dismissing them as trivial. This does not mean ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. It means holding pain within a frame that also perceives movement, support, and meaning. A practical habit is to speak 3 brief appreciations aloud when you notice the impulse to check. This discharges anxiety and restores the confirmation posture. Step 6 is periodic confirmation practice. Frequency beats duration. Several times a day, stop for 30 seconds and look at your reality through the confirmation lens. Ask, where do I see evidence that my outcome is already manifesting? What signs show that the field is reorganizing toward what I've instructed? Do not force. Scan gently and pick the first true indicator that arises, even if it is subtle or symbolic. Stack this practice onto existing anchors. After brushing teeth, before opening email, when you stand up from your desk, when you wait for an elevator, over time, these brief passes through confirmation reshape your baseline stance more effectively than a single long session of effortful focus. Step 7 is sleep state programming. When you fall asleep, conscious observation pauses, but unconscious processes continue to notice, evaluate, and bias experience. Give your sleeping mind a clean instruction set. A simple formula works. While I sleep, my awareness continues to observe reality, expecting to find the desired state. The field continues reorganizing accordingly. On waking, protect the first observation of the day. Before reaching for your phone or stepping into reactive tasks, look through the confirmation lens. I expect to discover that reorganization continued overnight and that my outcomes are closer now. This first observation sets the frequency for many hours. If you miss it, do not scold yourself. Insert a confirmation practice as soon as you remember. Sustaining the right observation method yields benefits that are specific and measurable, not just feel-better claims. One benefit is compressed timelines. What took weeks begins to take days, and what took days begins to take hours. Early on, mixed signaling slows the response because checking cancels confirmation. As you clean the signal, the field can move pieces into place more quickly. You will occasionally see near-instant manifestations, unexpected credits, emails that arrive seconds after you make space for them, a message appearing the moment you decide to release an old attachment events too swift to attribute to recent physical causes. Track these honestly in your log. You are building your own dataset. A second benefit is the density and precision of synchronicities. Random coincidences happen to everyone, but sustained confirmation observation produces a rhythm. You articulate an expectation and specific, meaningful confirmations appear within predictable windows. The content matches the expectation with uncommon exactness, the correct phrase, the precise number, the name you needed. Record channel independence, different sources, timing, and specificity. Do not inflate the data, but do not discard it either. Over time, the pattern becomes too strong to dismiss, and more importantly, it becomes practical guidance. The signs are not just winks from the universe. They are arrows telling you where to place attention and how to time your actions. A third benefit is the dissolving of obstacles that felt immovable when you observed them as problems. Problem-centric observation creates resistance because it spotlights blockages and primes defensive behavior. Confirmation observation places attention on elements that are already shifting or could shift with minimal input, revealing pathways that were previously invisible. It is common to experience a stuck project suddenly unstick because a missing participant appears, a policy is interpreted flexibly, or a requirement is reframed without loss of integrity. The obstacle was real, but your observation changed the configuration around it, making a solution path accessible. A fourth benefit is the emergence of clarity about action. In checking mode, doubt and confusion proliferate. You think harder and feel less sure. In confirmation mode, the next move becomes obvious in a quiet, unforced way through a small insight, an intuition with a steady signal, or an external nudge that lands with resonance. The test for such clarity is felt simplicity. The action requires effort, but there is no inner argument. You are not figuring out what to do from scratch. You are discovering what is already indicated inside a configuration you helped create through observation. A fifth benefit is an improved emotional baseline. You do not wait for circumstances to change before you allow relief. Because you are deliberately observing for evidence of improvement, your nervous system receives regular signals of progress, safety, and support. This does not remove grief, anger, or fear from human life, but it prevents these states from monopolizing attention. Emotional steadiness, in turn, reduces checking impulses, which keeps your signal clean, a virtuous cycle. Several practical considerations increase reliability. First, define scope. Apply confirmation observation to one or two focal areas at a time. Overbroad instruction dilutes attention. Second, select thresholds. Decide in advance what counts as sufficient confirmation for a given time frame, what you will count as on track, by noon, by end of day, by Friday. Third, maintain ethical alignment. Confirmation observation is not a tool for coercion. Frame expectations that honor consent, mutual benefit, and reality's complexity. For example, do not observe expecting a specific person to behave against their will. Observe expecting a mutually beneficial resolution or the emergence of a better fit alternative. Fourth, integrate action. Observation is not a replacement for behavior, it is a governor for behavior. When clear action arises, take it promptly. The field uses your behavior as part of the reorganization sequence. Troubleshooting follows predictable patterns. If you notice no confirmations for days, audit for covert checking. Review your log. Are your entries mostly still nothing? That narration is itself checking. Replace it with explicit searches for any positive micro-indicator. If anxiety spikes, downshift to micro-intention. Set expectation for the next 15 minutes only. Look for one supportive sign in that window. If contrary evidence accumulates, strengthen the two-timeline frame. Acknowledge the surface layer honestly and then look for underlying movement. If you feel numb or cynical, practice appreciation mechanically for a few minutes. List 10 neutral to positive facts you can agree with now. This is not pretending, it is rebalancing attention so confirmation has a channel. Examples help ground the abstractions. Imagine a freelancer facing irregular income. The default observation is scarcity. There are no inquiries, and bills are due. The right observation method begins with an intention such as, I expect to find clear indications that revenue is organizing through both known and new channels. Evidence gathering might include a past client viewing your profile today, a dormant lead liking a post, a friend mentioning a company that exactly matches your niche. Instead of checking your bank balance obsessively, you pivot to confirming where is flow already appearing. Contrary evidence, a declined proposal, is acknowledged as a snapshot while the trajectory continues. Appreciation emphasizes capacity, relationships, and skill growth. Periodic confirmations keep attention tuned throughout the workday, and before sleep you program your unconscious to notice and align. Over a week, you may see a small retainer come in, a warm referral from a surprising source, and a better-paying project replacing one you thought you needed. Were these outcomes possible without observation work? Yes. Would you have recognized and configured them as quickly without observation work? Typically, no. Consider a health scenario. Your baseline includes fatigue and intermittent pain. The intention becomes, I expect to find evidence that healing is already underway and that my energy is incrementally increasing. Evidence gathering honors subtlety, a morning with slightly less stiffness, a craving for healthier food, a stable heart rate in a situation that used to spike it, a practitioner recommendation that resonates. Checking impulses, Googling worst-case outcomes, are replaced by confirmation passes. Where is resilience visible today? Contrary evidence, an ache, a bad night is framed as a local fluctuation while the deeper system rebuilds. Appreciation focuses on the body's thousands of intelligent operations that proceed without conscious input. Periodic confirmation and sleep programming build continuity. The outcome is not magical thinking. It is a steady bias toward behaviors and environments that support recovery, plus an openness that draws effective help into your orbit. A relationship example further clarifies social dynamics. Suppose a colleague's emails feel curt, and you infer hostility. The intention resets as, I expect to find evidence that our collaboration is solid and that alignment is developing. Evidence might appear as a clearer request, a shared laugh in a meeting, or a small acknowledgement of your effort. You stop checking for disrespect and start confirming for alignment. When an abrupt message arrives, instead of using it as proof of antagonism, You hold it as a snapshot and ask a clarifying question from a neutral tone. Often the reply reveals a workload crunch rather than malice. Appreciation highlights any cooperation, however small. Over time, the interpersonal field shifts from brittle to constructive because your expectation organizes your own behavior and, indirectly, theirs. For advanced practice, calibrate granularity. At times you will set broad expectations, overall project success. At other times, micro expectations, a clear next email. Stack expectations hierarchically so they reinforce each other. Also, experiment with symbolic anchors. Choose a personal symbol of alignment and treat its appearance as a confirmation cue. Be precise. Select a symbol uncommon enough to carry information value. Finally, run periodic retrospectives. Review your log weekly, count confirmations, categorize them, social, financial, health, logistical, symbolic, and note lag times. This converts your experience into data you can trust and refine. None of this requires metaphysical certainty about how the field works. You can treat the model as pragmatic. Observation method changes behavior and perception. Behavior and perception change outcomes. Therefore, observation method is a high leverage point. You can also allow for a more expansive view in which observation participates in reality's unfolding in ways our current models only partially describe. Either way, the practice remains the same. Set intention, gather evidence, interrupt checking, reframe contrary data, cultivate appreciation, confirm periodically, program sleep, act when clarity arrives, and measure your results. When you uphold this method consistently, your life begins to feel different in ways that are testable. You will recognize the fourth signal as people mirror the cooperation you expect. You will notice the fifth signal as reality details line up with eerie specificity. You will rely on the sixth signal as latency drops because your instruction is consistent. You will walk through the seventh signal as doors open in walls you assumed were solid. The method is not a one-time trick. It is a stance you strengthen across days and contexts until it becomes your default. That is when outcomes compound, because the field is no longer forced to decode mixed messages, and your sense of agency stabilizes from a reactive hope into a practiced, grounded expectation. Wrong observation reliably generates negative emotion because it trains your attention to search for evidence of lack, limitation, and threat. When your observing stance is calibrated to find what is missing, your nervous system dutifully delivers a matching emotional profile. Tightness in the chest, a narrowed field of view, irritability, the sensation that nothing is moving and everything is scarce. The circumstances might not have changed at all, but your interpretation has biased what you notice and how you narrate what you notice, and emotion follows that narration. Right observation reverses the sequence. By deliberately looking for evidence of improvement and possibility, even modest signals that something is getting better, you create a different inner climate, warmth, curiosity, openness, a readiness to engage. In other words, the same external conditions observed through two different lenses produce opposite emotional experiences, because emotion responds primarily to the way you interpret what you observe, not to facts in isolation. Your body is honest about the story your mind is telling. Change the mode of observation and the story shifts, and your emotions shift with it. From that foundation, a profound benefit appears in human relationships. They can heal without grueling confrontations, forced reconciliations, or elaborate postmortems. When you look at a relationship expecting to find conflict, you will almost always find it not because you are a pessimist, but because that expectation sharpens your antennae for slights, ambiguities, and mismatches. You hear a clipped sentence as a jab instead of a rushed reply. You interpret silence as contempt instead of fatigue. You lean in at the wrong time, pull back at the wrong moment, and the other person mirrors what you bring. But when you look expecting harmony, you begin to notice all the micro-signals that harmony is available. The pauses where patience lives, the small appreciation that would be easy to skip, the offer of help that previously didn't register. Without coercion, both people subtly reorganize. The tone softens, timing improves, generosity reappears. The field of the relationship takes its cues from the observation you hold. Conflict-focused observing entrains conflict dynamics. Focused observing entrains harmony dynamics. This is not magic, and it is not denial. It is the simple fact that expectation affects attention. Attention steers behavior, and behavior shapes response. You cannot control another person, but you can participate differently in the shared space between you. And that space is where much of the relational weather is formed. A related benefit is the arrival of solutions from directions you could not have reached through planning or strenuous effort. You spend months working at a problem with familiar tools and familiar logic, and then a line of information arrives at an angle you did not even know existed. A conversation overheard at the exact moment you needed it. A book recommended by a new acquaintance whose timing is uncannily precise. A resource that materializes from a source you would have dismissed as irrelevant. These events are not merely convenient coincidences, they are demonstrations that there is intelligence in the field of life patterns and possibilities beyond the confines of your conscious planning, and that this intelligence is easier to collaborate with when your observation is not constantly checking for absence. Checking observation narrows the corridor of acceptable solutions to what your conscious mind already expects. Confirmation observation leaves the door ajar for forms you wouldn't have specified, and the field can do what it does best: root around stuck points with elegance. Everything gathered so far leads to a culminating recognition. You are not a separate observer standing outside an independent universe, peering in as a passive witness. You are consciousness, and your observation is the mechanism by which potential becomes actual in your experience. Observation isn't something you perform after reality is already finished. Observation is how the unfinished becomes finished. In the absence of observation, possibility remains open, indeterminate like a vast field of seeds that could sprout in any direction. Your observing stance is one of the decisive forces that selects which sprout breaks the surface and becomes the reality you interact with. Some will frame this as a spiritual insight. Others will recognize it as an interpretation of the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, the way the act of measurement yields a definite outcome from a cloud of possibilities. However you contextualize it, the practical consequence is the same. Your observation matters. It does not merely color your mood. It conditions which paths you recognize, which signals you follow, which doors you knock on, and therefore which world you walk into. Follow this to its logical conclusion and an empowering reversal occurs. You are not a powerless passenger carried along by a river of fixed circumstances. You are a participant whose consciousness is constantly selecting, by means of observation, which among many available rivers you are actually in. This reframing dissolves certain forms of limitation. If what you are experiencing is a collapsed possibility among countless possibilities, then reality is not a monolith, it is a selection. Any specific situation can reorganize, because a situation is the current arrangement among many potential arrangements. Change how you observe, and the collapsed arrangement is likely to change with it. This also clarifies why effort often fails where observation succeeds. Effort operates downstream, trying to push around the furniture after the room is already arranged. Observation operates upstream, at the level where the arrangement itself is chosen. Neither is dispensable. Effort still matters, but effort without upstream clarity is wasteful, while observation without downstream participation is incomplete. When you work at both levels, choosing the arrangement through confirmation, observation, then stepping into the actions that arrangement invites, the probability of graceful change increases. Extend the recognition another step, and the social world becomes easier to understand. Each person is consciousness experiencing a reality shaped, in part, by their observation method. Realities overlap where observations align and diverge where they don't. This is why two people can stand inside the same business meeting and tell very different stories afterward, one describing a set of constraints and disappointments, the other describing openings and opportunities. They were not lying, they were observing differently, and each collapsed a different version of the situation into experience. This means you cannot force others to live inside your observation. You can influence the space you share with them by how you see them and how you show up, but how they experience themselves is shaped primarily by their own observation. The invitation is simple. Demonstrate through your results what a different observation method makes possible. People ready to shift will ask how you're doing it. Those who are not ready will meet you later, perhaps via the resonance your results created. With freedom comes responsibility. If observation participates in creating the reality you experience, then your recurring experience is a reflection of your dominant observation patterns. That is not a moral judgment or a cosmic punishment, it is mechanics. If you repeatedly encounter lack, it is likely that your observation has been anchored in the expectation of lack, continually scanning for not enough, and convincing your behavior to avoid or sabotage opportunities. If you repeatedly encounter abundance, your observation has probably been tuned to notice channels of supply and to act when they appear. If your days feel like a string of problems, you have likely been observing for problems. If your days reveal solutions from surprising angles, you have likely been observing for solutions. The mirror is impersonal and precise. This is not about blame, it is about leverage. If your current observation contributed to the current snapshot, then a new observation can contribute to a new snapshot. You are not glued to any scene. You are free to move by changing what you expect to discover as you look. Notice what happens as you read these words. You are not learning a decorative theory. You are participating in the exact mechanism being described. Your reading is observation. Concepts are being selected, emphasized, and brought into focus. As that happens, your inner state adjusts, perhaps a small lift in energy, perhaps curiosity, perhaps resistance that signals where an old pattern is attached. That immediate feedback is not incidental. It is the field reorganizing in response to your current observation of these ideas. Understanding becomes recognition. Recognition becomes a bodily shift. The bodily shift becomes a slightly different way of looking at your next email, your next conversation, your next decision. The mechanism is alive in the moment. Zoom out and you will see that you are not exploring this alone. Around the world, people are converging on similar conclusions through diverse doorways. The philosophy of science, the psychology of attention, contemplative traditions, practical manifestation frameworks, and cutting-edge research into consciousness. They use different vocabularies, but they keep pointing to the same structural truth. Observation is not passive, it is creative, and it shapes the realities we walk into. As more people practice and demonstrate this, it becomes easier for others to adopt. Patterns in collective consciousness behave like grooves on a record. Once carved deeply enough, the needle settles into them with less friction. Every time you maintain confirmation, observation, and produce real-world results, an easing in a relationship, a project that moves by synchronicity, a body that heals more readily, you help deepen the groove that makes similar results easier for others to access. You become part of a rising baseline, where conscious observation is normal, not exotic. Share what you are learning, but only with those who are ready to test it. The most persuasive argument is not a lecture. It is a life that steadily produces outcomes that look improbable from the outside and obvious from the inside. If someone is already noticing synchronicities and wondering whether their observation is doing more than coloring their mood, give them the method. Set intention, gather evidence, interrupt checking, reframe contrary data, cultivate appreciation, run periodic confirmations, program your sleep, and act when clarity arises. They will discover, as you did, that this is not placebo. If someone is not ready, there is no need to press. They will find their way to the practice when their own data persuades them. There remains one essential safeguard: how to make the right observation method a stable capacity instead of a temporary practice that collapses under stress. Challenges will arise. Old habits of checking will flare. The wider world, which often treats reality as fixed and scarce, will pull at your attention. Stability requires structure. Create a simple tracking system that makes you more conscious of your observation in real time. You might record briefly: morning intention, midday confirmations, evening appreciations. This is not busy work, it is a mirror for your attention. Build a contrary evidence protocol in advance. When facts appear to contradict your desired trajectory, you will pause, breathe, restate the two-timeline frame, surface snapshot versus deeper reorganization, find one true sign of movement, and take one grounded action that honors both reality and possibility. Practice a coherence routine that steadies your physiology's slow breathing. A short walk, a simple prayer or mantra so your body can tolerate holding a positive expectation without flipping into threat or fantasy. Most of all, become fast at catching, checking in the act and pivoting back to confirmation. Each pivot is a rep. Enough reps, and the muscle holds on its own. There is also the social dimension of mastery, holding a confirmation stance while living among people who often observe in the old way. You can do this without isolating yourself or resenting others. Treat every interaction as a chance to practice gentle calibration. When someone is scanning for lack, you can listen with compassion and then ask a confirming question, what seems to be working already, without dismissing their pain. When a group spirals into problem talk, you can name one concrete improvement or possibility and invite attention there. You are not arguing against problems. You are pointing out that problems do not get smaller by staring at them harder. They get smaller by noticing and amplifying the forces already moving in a different direction. If you want a single declaration that anchors the shift, you can put it in plain language. My observation creates my reality through the mechanics of the field. The words themselves are not a spell, but they summarize a commitment. You understand that observing is an active choice. You accept responsibility for that choice, and you intend to keep choosing observation methods that align with outcomes you care about. Write it down. Say it out loud. See what changes in your posture, your breathing, and your willingness to test the method today, not in some distant future when conditions are perfect. From here, the work is iterative and increasingly natural. The old paradigm asked you to observe reality to find out what is true and then submit to it. The new paradigm invites you to observe reality in ways that help create what you prefer to be true, all while remaining honest, ethical, and in conversation with the larger field of life. You recognize circumstances as fluid rather than immovable, and you expect to discover evidence that what you desire is already in motion rather than perpetually absent. You stop waiting for external proof before you allow your inner state to stabilize. You let your results speak for themselves. And as they do, your trust grows, your consistency improves, and the latency between intention and manifestation shrinks. Along the way, keep your sense of humor and your rigor. Do not inflate every coincidence into a cosmic decree, and do not flatten every synchronicity into mere chance. Track your experience carefully. Note the specificity of confirmations, the independence of channels, the timing of events. Observe how your behavior changes when you hold confirmation rather than checking, and how people respond to you when you arrive with a different tone and pace. Notice how often the impossible paths are also the kindest, most efficient, least wasteful paths, the ones that reduce friction instead of demanding heroics. Let those observations become your evidence. Let the evidence teach you how to refine your craft. In time, what began as a deliberate practice becomes a native stance. You will find yourself defaulting to confirmation without effort. You will catch checking almost as soon as it appears, and you will smile as you pivot. The field will seem more conversational, and you will recognize its responses as part of a dialogue rather than as a series of disconnected accidents. Your relationships will get lighter and deeper at once. Your work will align more cleanly with your strengths and values. Your body will feel safer. And when you do face difficulty, as every human does, you will bring with you an ability to hold the snapshot and the trajectory at the same time, honest about what hurts, faithful about what is moving, attuned to the next right action. Observe correctly, and reality will rewrite itself to match the instruction you are giving it moment by moment. That is not a promise of control. It is an invitation to participate at the level where participation has the most leverage. You have always been observing. Now you know how to do it on purpose.